Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another ROM event. ROM is a program by Forum for Leadership and Reconciliation. ROM stands for Renewing Our Minds. And we love to promote the ideas of reconciliation and leadership. We love, or actually I love to quote, we had a Zoom today with another person who is very much interested in reconciliation and is moving to Bosnia in a few weeks. And I love to quote to everyone this verse from 2 Corinthians, and it says, God has given us the ministry of reconciliation. And we believe that God wants to reconcile the world to him, but God also wants to see people reconciled with the people. So that's what we are trying to do. And I'm part of this program for the last 20 years. Many people are part for shorter or longer, but it's a community of friends. And it's very nice to see all of you here tonight. I hope we will be enjoying our speakers. And because my wife, Rachel, knows them much better, I would hand the mic to her and she can introduce them and we can go on and enjoy this evening. So, Rachel.
Yeah, so I've known Ron and Jeanine for about, it would be about 24 years since I was in high school in Central Asia. And we kind of providentially reconnected last summer after ROM in Skopje, Macedonia. And I just wanted to ask Ron and Jeanine if they want to share a little bit about their experience here in the Balkans. You can also share about your first trip a couple of years ago, which I know was also interesting.
Yeah,
just for a couple of minutes as like an introduction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jeanine and I had actually first visited the Balkans almost 4 years ago. We drove from Austria across Slovenia to Zagreb and then flew from Zagreb to Sarajevo and spent several days there. Meeting with people that are involved as peacemakers there in Sarajevo and exploring abilities that we could join in on some of the program there in Sarajevo. Our visit this last summer was a little less at our own will because we were evacuated from Kyrgyzstan on a medevac flight to Skopje because that was the only hospital we could find in Europe that would take us because we both had COVID, and we are very grateful to the Macedonians for allowing us in and also for curing us. And it was during our convalescence. We were 2 weeks in the hospital and then 2 more weeks convalescing with 2 of our daughters taking care of us. And because they're friends with Rachel, and Rachel, Boyan agreed to take care of the kids, and Rachel came down and hung out with us for a couple of days. Just, it was great to get to have that time together. So we're very appreciative of the Balkans.
So then we had the chance to talk, and I heard about Ron's PhD work and the work that Ron and Jeanine have both been doing in the States and in Central Asia in the last, several years since we had last seen each other. And so I got excited because I saw so much overlap with ROM. And so I'm just going to go ahead and let you guys start, and you can work in. People have mostly seen your bio and in emails or Facebook events or whatever. So I'm going to let you kind of work in what you think is relevant also from your bio into your talk. So yeah, you can go ahead and start.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Ron said. We found the people in Macedonia to be so kind, caring. I would say the medical staff was sacrificially caring for us. And I know that they previously to us cared for a lot of people, and they continue to do that now. And our hearts are with the people of Central Europe and particularly Macedonia. So, and we thank them.
Yeah. So just to get us launched, I'd I would just pose a hypothetical question to y'all. If you found out that, what do you think you would be doing right now? And I'm going to just assume that you probably would all leave this Zoom call and be doing something else besides spending time with us. Because my guess is that you wouldn't be concerned about academic degrees, about fame, about possessions, about step to the people that you love and care about to say, I'm sorry, I love you, I forgive you. Would you forgive me? It's because life is all about relationships. It's not about those other things like fame and possessions and status, success. In order to get us launched, I'd like to begin with a story. We're going to try to tell several
Can I
stories.
just interrupt for a second?
Yeah,
You said
absolutely.
if you found out and then you got cut off. If we found out what?
Oh, if you found out the world was ending 1 month from today.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Got it.
Did you get all the rest of what I said after that?
We did. We literally just missed that one phrase.
Oh my. Well, yeah, that wasn't a very effective introduction, but we'll continue. Yeah, I want to go ahead and share screen, and because we do have a PowerPoint that I want to begin from, so I can share. Nope, that's not it. Here it is. So that I can share a story. Let's see if it'll. Okay, there we go. And it was fun to find out that my friend Jim Teal is also a friend of Boyan and Rachel, but
Well, many other people here would know him also.
all right, that's
He's
fantastic.
there next to you in the picture.
Right, but my story is about the gentleman on my other side from Jim, who all of us were together as PhD students in Florida. And this other gentleman is Benjamin. And Benjamin is from Ghana. And when we first met, as we were getting acquainted, he shared with me that in his childhood, they experienced a war that's now known as the Guinea Fowl War. It began with two men in a bazaar arguing over a guinea fowl, which, if you're not familiar, is a kind of a chicken. And Benjamin shared with me that it was out of his childhood experience that he was motivated to study conflict resolution. And that's how we met. But yes, it began with an argument over a guinea fowl between two men who were from different tribes. And their argument disintegrated into a fist fight, and one of the men ended up being beaten quite badly by the other man. And out of his shame and anger and desire for revenge, he took a gun the next day to the farm where the man was raising his guinea fowl, and they struggled together, and in the end, the man with the gun was actually killed by his own gun. But that led to rumors spreading that the one tribe was out to kill the members of the other tribe, and before much time had passed, the violence had resulted in thousands of people killed, 400 villages destroyed, 100,000 refugees, and millions of dollars in damage done, setting the economy of that region back for years. Benjamin's family, when they heard that members of the other tribe were headed their way, fled from their village and spent the next 6 months living as refugees in the mountains. before they got word that it was safe enough for them to return to their home. And their home, their entire village had been destroyed in the violence. And so this was the Guinea Fowl War. It began on February 1st, 1994. And on that day, Jeanine and I and our 4 children were sitting on an airplane in Domodedovo Airport in Moscow, waiting for the ice in Almaty to clear so that our flight could take off and land us in Almaty. We landed on February 2nd, Groundhog Day. And the movie Groundhog Day became our family movie theme. And Jeanine and I watched it again with our friends here just the other day, because the line, "Time to put your booties on, it's cold out there this morning." Of course, it's cold out there every morning, became our line with our children. "Time to put your booties on because there are babushkas out there this morning." Of course, there are babushkas out there every morning. Our children did not want to be told by the babushkas that they weren't dressed properly. But anyway, Binneman's childhood experiences, as I said, led him to desire to study conflict resolution. And in fact, he went back to Ghana for his dissertation research in much the same way I went back to Kazakhstan for mine. But he also told me that this war was one of only 5 similar conflicts that took place over a period of 15 years there in Ghana that affected his people, affected his life. One of them was, again, an argument in a bazaar over mangoes between 2 women that resulted in a war. I share that with you because currently I work as a professor of international relations, and yet I'm also very directly interested in what causes interpersonal conflict. Because as you see from this story, what began as an interpersonal conflict very quickly escalated into a war. And it's just one of many such conflicts that can begin in such simple ways. And so the thesis for our talk is connected to this phrase, "for want of a nail." Some of you may be familiar with this. It's kind of a parable that begins with this phrase, "for want of a nail." It's a parable about a war being fought between 2 kingdoms, and a message was sent from the king to his general, and the messenger was riding a horse, but the one of the horse's shoes was missing a nail, and because the shoe was loose, the horse lost the shoe. The horse became lame. The messenger wasn't able to find another horse before he was captured by the enemy. He never was able to deliver his message to the general. The battle was lost, and as a result, the kingdom was lost, all for want of a nail. And so the story goes, all for the want of a horseshoe nail. I share this with you because this is known as the butterfly effect. And some of you maybe have heard this phrase. It talks about the chain of causality and how a simple, well, there was a talk given by an American mathematician and meteorologist a number of years ago titled, "Does the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil set off a tornado in Texas?" And so he was proposing that a chain of atmospheric events beginning from the flap of a butterfly's wings might set off a tornado. And as I said, that's known as the chain of causality. And this is connected to systems theory, to chaos theory, It's the sensitive dependence on initial conditions. And I share this because I want to point out that the significance of our choices, of your choices and mine, of each of us as a person, matters. Each of you matter. Each of your choices matter greatly. And the choices we make, especially with intentionality, can generate a powerful force for peace, for justice, for well-being, for ourselves and for the people around us. Too many times we think that my choices really don't matter, what I do, what I say, but I just want to challenge and encourage each one of you that every one of us can be the nail that holds together a relationship, a community, a university, even a nation, if we make those choices intentionally. So arguments in bazaars, traffic accidents, etc., do not need to end in violence, leading even to war, death, destruction, and displacement. You and I can be the nail or provide the nail that may be missing. So why am I talking about chickens, mangoes in Ghana, nails, butterflies? It's because I want you to see the connection between basic human problems and problems in a community, a society, a nation, and even on an international level. So now I'm going to ask Jeanine to share a story about a woman whom we know and whom we've worked with named Charletta Evans.
Okay. Charletta lives in Denver, and in 1995, her 3-year-old son was killed in a drive-by shooting here in Denver, Colorado. She had gone to pick up her niece in another neighborhood that was experiencing violence, and she just wanted to bring her into a safer place. And as she was going into the apartment to get her, her 2 sons were asleep in the car, and a car came by and shot through the car, and her 3-year-old son died. The car and the shooter, the car driver and the shooter were 15 years old and 16 years old. So when she got to the trial and saw them for the first time, she just said, "These are children. Children killed my Cason." Cason was his name. So she forgave him, the killer. And I looked up a newspaper article, and this is, I'm going to quote from that to give her words their worth that they're due. "I forgave him, and it was the only way I was able to live on and be present for my surviving son, was to forgive him." So she wanted to talk to him personally, face to face, and there are laws to protect the victim from being re-victimized. And so it wasn't until 17 years later that she had the opportunity to meet face to face with the young man who did the shooting. His name is Raymond Johnson. So there had been a newly passed law in Colorado, and she was the first one with this new law to be able to speak with the person who had killed her son. So she wanted that. She wanted understanding and she wanted healing, and she thought a talk could do that. And actually the talk ended up being 8 hours long. And it's, we know the person who facilitated that talk. It took many months before talking to Charlotta and to Raymond Johnson until she said, okay, we're ready to talk. So, and it was Charlotta and her son, Calvin, who was 6 years old at the time his brother had died. And so now he was in his early 20s. But Calvin said that he knew that Raymond Johnson took responsibility when he was weeping uncontrollably, tears were flowing, and he just said, I messed up. And that was part of their conversation. So at the end of 8 hours, Charlotta gave this man a hug. And again, I'm going to quote what she said in this article. I left there hugging Raymond Johnson. I accepted him as my son because he was absent of his parents. And they continued from that point on to keep in touch about twice a week. And I know she wrote letters and there were some phone calls. So, and then 17 years.
No, that was 17
No,
years
yeah.
ago.
In 2019, she legally adopted this man who had made those shots with his gun. So I think I'll leave the story there.
Okay. So Charlotta's story is a story about restorative justice, because the law that was passed that allowed Charlotta to meet with Raymond was specifically designed to allow for there to be restorative dialogue between victims and offenders of violent crimes. And this work of restorative dialogue, restorative justice is work that Jeanine and I have been involved in for a number of years. It's what brought us into contact with Charlotta and allowed us the chance to work together with her. She's devoted her life since that time, since her son's death, to fighting against youth violence and specifically gang violence. And when we first met Charlotta and heard her story, she was co-presenting with Raymond's mother, because they had met together, they'd become friends. Charlotta believed both of us have lost our sons as a result of this crime. And so she wanted to meet and get to know Raymond's mother, who has since passed away. But then we actually got to work with Charlotta in our own city, where we had a municipal court program for juvenile offenders, repeat offenders, and we were working together with the judge, with the courts, the probation officers, in order to try to help some of these youth to take responsibility for the crimes that they had committed, and perhaps have the chance for reconciliation with their victims. And Charlotta was a speaker sharing her story with these young people. And then together we were all facilitating restorative conferences. So what I want to share in relation to this is what we refer to as the 5 R's framework, the 5 R's of restorative justice. And those are relationship, respect, responsibility, repair, and reintegration. Relationship and respect, specifically, as we develop those, we're working to prevent crime and conflict. Responsibility and repair, of course, are part of resolving that conflict. And if we're able to bring the parties to reintegration, to to reconciliation and new relationship, restored relationship, then we can see conflict transformed. So just to illustrate responsibility and repair, Jeanine's got another personal story. You're gonna skip to that?
Oh, okay, yeah. Yes, this is a personal story that happened only a few weeks ago, so I thought it would be worth sharing. I said something to someone that hurt them, and then their response hurt me. And so it took about, I was waiting for that other person to talk to me about the hurt that they had caused me. And then God hit me over the head. Actually, it was with a poem that a pastor was sharing at church. And it dawned on me, oh, here I am waiting for someone to make it right with me. And I'm the one that caused those hurtful words to be said to me. I hurt the person first. And so, yeah, it was, and it completely changed my emotions to one of hurt to remorse that I had hurt them. And I think sometimes when we are in an argument, our hurt kind of clouds our judgment on what we did. But it had been enough days that it was clear. So what I did was I decided to write a text. I thought that would be most appropriate. And I wanted to not say it in person because I didn't want to drag on the conversation and end up justifying and explaining why I said the things I did. I just wanted to own up that I had made hurt, caused the hurt, and acknowledging the feelings that they felt and ask forgiveness. And so I wrote a simple text with that, and immediately I was forgiven. So, and the relationship is back to where it was.
So what I want to do is just illustrate the 5 R's in the stories that we've shared. And one thing I want to point out now, in the case Jeanine's just now sharing, this was an ongoing relationship that was damaged by the hurtful words that were said by both parties. In the case of Charlotta and Raymond, they were strangers to each other, but as a result of that violent act that and the consequence of the death of Charlotta's son, she and Raymond found themselves in a relationship. It was not a good relationship. It was not a healthy relationship. It began as a broken relationship. And yet, as Charlotta said, she was tied to Raymond and she had to forgive him to be able to move on with her life. And it's a long story of how she came to that realization, but for the length of time it took until she was at a point of being able to say, I forgive him, she was stuck in that broken relationship. So in any case, restoration begins with a relationship. And in order to move on to resolution and hopefully reintegration, sometimes it requires some facilitation. In Jeanine's case, she came to the realization that she needed to take initiative. But in Charlotta's case, she needed the help of someone to facilitate. And that's what took place. The woman who actually trained us in restorative justice was the facilitator that worked with Charlotta and Raymond over a period of months before they finally were able to come together and speak. And one of the things that facilitator wanted to ensure was that the dialogue would be respectful. And she needed to help Charlotta understand how that could take place, to help Raymond understand how that would take place, that they would not violate each other in the course of their dialogue. And so that was crucial. But in our restorative justice work, we work hard to also prevent conflict and prevent violence by working with people to strengthen relationships and to build respect in order to avoid and prevent that kind of conflict. And so one of the ways we do that is by a circle dialogue process that we've used quite a bit in schools with children and also at the university level. And Jeanine would like to share just a little bit about circle dialogue.
Yeah. The main thing is to create, to become known more and to create understanding and trust. And we saw that a lot in the schools. I've done it at a women's prison and where people were sharing. So everything's confidential. We have a talking piece, and whoever's talking must be holding the talking piece, and whoever is not holding the talking piece must be listening. So, and we try to listen well. And I learned this from the kindergartners that, you know, I told them we listen with our ears and our eyes, and they said we also listen with our hearts. So they are great. They were great teachers. They listened very well. But the story I also wanted to mention is that we've done this in our own family, probably not with great intentionality, or we're going to have a circle dialogue. But we do that every Thanksgiving. We share what we're thankful for. We share 5 times. And so the 4th and 5th story end up being a story to explain why you're thankful for this one thing. And so it's usually over dessert, and dessert is very long. Also, after we came back from Skopje, we had a discussion one evening around the table with all of us about sharing how our illness with COVID affected everyone, and it affected everyone and in different ways. And there was a lot more understanding in general, and then I understood why certain people did certain things, why we were sick.
Yeah. So circle dialogue is one of the practices that we use, especially for prevention to strengthen relationship and respect, but we also use facilitated restorative conferencing in order to encourage participants in a conflict to take responsibility and to do what they can to repair the harm. As we look at Charlotta and Raymond's case, it was Raymond's expression of remorse that demonstrated that he was taking responsibility for the harm that he had caused to Charlotta, to her other son, Calvin, and his expression of remorse and his expression of sorrow and apology contributed to the repair. There was no way to bring Causation back, of course, but that dialogue allowed the communication of responsibility and desire to repair to be communicated between the two of them. And as a result, there was repair. And it brought peace to Charlotta and to Calvin. And as Jeanine shared, in 2019, Charlotta adopted Raymond. He was still in prison. In fact, he had been in prison for life without parole, although they managed to reduce his sentence later. And as we were getting ready to share with you today, we thought, let's check, is there any information? And Jeanine was trying to get information to clarify certain points of the story that we didn't remember quite correctly. And in her search, she found a different story that we had not heard yet. And I'd like to share a brief video with you, if we can share again, that I think you'll find quite interesting. Okay, no, that's not to play the video, and I can't exit the screen. Okay, let's try again. I'll just start the video and maybe I can make it a full screen for you. There.
On this December 21st,
I'm here today with my 3 sons.
Charlotta Evans is celebrating a victory as she sits at a park with her son Calvin, her adopted son Raymond Johnson, and a photo of her late 3-year-old son, Cason Evans.
I feel accomplished. I feel like that all the work was not in vain. And I also feel very emotional that Cason's not here.
On December 21st of 1995, Cason was killed in a drive-by shooting at the hands of then 15-year-old Raymond Johnson.
That night, it changed me. By pulling the trigger, doing everything I did, it changed me.
Raymond was sentenced to life behind bars without the possibility of parole, but later his sentence was reduced, giving him the chance to be released.
When you take another human being's life, you lose a part of yourself. Like, you're never the same.
On November 29th, 42-year-old Raymond was released from prison and says Cason's killing sticks with him.
I believe that Cason sacrificed his life to save my life because I was so consumed with the world that I didn't know where I was going.
Over the years, Charlotta, Raymond, and Calvin have worked through their trauma. They're so close, Charlotta...
That's what we can do.
Yeah. Well, if that's all we can do, then it's probably okay. I guess we're not frozen, just the video is. So I'm going to stop that.
Maybe you can share the link with us so we can go back and finish watching it later.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll share the link. I've got another link that I'm wanting to share as well. So yeah, I think we'll actually stop the screen share and just share some of our.
Go ahead and summarize that.
Yeah.
The bottom line is Raymond Johnson was released from prison in November of.
Calls Raymond, her son.
Oh,
I've learned that
we're gonna stop.
no one is a throwaway. I've learned that the
Okay. All right. Sorry. So.
Yeah, he was released from prison in November 2021. And now they're working on trying to get to know each other more face to face than they have before. And if you remember, he's now her adopted son, like she said.
Yeah. So that is a beautiful story of reintegration where, as I said, what had been a relationship but began as a broken relationship ended in healing, restoration, reconciliation, and reintegration to where Raymond is even now a part of Charlotta's family. So those are the two practices we mentioned, the circle dialogue and the facilitated conferencing, are what we kind of consider to be community practices, although you can obviously practice them in a family, even, as Jeanine mentioned, that we've done with circle dialogue. But I did want to just mention an interpersonal practice that some of you may be aware of. I don't know, but I want to recommend to you something Jeanine and I've been learning about called Nonviolent Communication. We've been to a workshop. We're signed up for a series of classes. We actually were going to come to Montenegro in 2020 to go through an 11-day intensive in nonviolent communication. Obviously, it got canceled by COVID. There's another one going on in Slovenia later this month, but we're just not able to get involved in that. But we're still hoping to go through one of these intensives. And nonviolent communication, briefly, is about learning to stop, observe what's happening with me, what's going on with me, my emotions, my feelings, and what my needs are that are driving my feelings, so that I can then actually observe what's happening with my conversation partner and and kind of anticipate what is it that they're probably feeling right now, and what might their needs be that are causing those feelings, and then how can I engage with them in a way that will help meet both of our needs. And this is the work of Marshall Rosenberg, and some of you may be aware of nonviolent communication and the books written by Marshall Rosenberg. I've got a link to where you can download free PDF versions of his nonviolent communication book, as well as several of his other books. And I'll share that, as well as the link for that video. But in conclusion, I just want to say again, if you knew the world was going to end a month from now, I think, like us, you would not be here on this call, and you would not be consumed with success or fame or possessions or all the other things that seem so important in the moment, but you would be focused on relationships. And so I just want to encourage you that don't wait until you find out the world's about to end. Go to someone today and say, I'm sorry. And tomorrow find somebody else that you could say, I love you. And the day after that, I forgive you. And the day after that, would you forgive me? And the day after that, and the day after that. And in doing so, you and I will be the nail. We'll be the butterfly wings, making a difference, bringing peace to the world, one reconciled relationship at a time. So thank you. We'd be happy to take any questions that we could.
Thank you so much. This was really, as I said in the beginning, it's really in tune with what we talk about at ROM. But of course, you brought a special perspective. And I think the Guinea Fowl War is such a fascinating illustration. The name sounded vaguely familiar to me, but it was amazing to hear how such a small conflict can escalate. But I think if we looked closely at other wars, we'd find that that was probably true in them as well. But yeah, I want to open it up if anyone else has any questions. Feel free to jump in. You can just unmute yourselves. I think there's not too many of us here, or you can write it if you're more comfortable with that. About this intensive that you mentioned in Slovenia, it's probably late for any of us to join, but if someone wanted to go to one in the future, how do you find out about them?
I would recommend that you look for the Center for Nonviolent Communication online. Just Google that. and you can sign up for announcements,
Okay.
especially about events, and or just on that website you could just look for events, and it's International Intensive Trainings, IITs,
Mm-hmm.
and they share where they're being held all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I mention Montenegro and Slovenia only because that's where we wanted to go,
Mm-hmm.
so that we could participate, because we were in Kazakhstan at the time, planning to just make the trip to Montenegro in October of 2020, but had to actually leave Kazakhstan because of COVID in 2020,
Mm-hmm.
and then again in 2021 because we caught COVID. But yeah, we're looking forward to getting that training and making it a more integrated part of the work that we do in conflict resolution and restorative justice.
Okay, perfect. And I think that Alan found that link and posted it. And he also had a question, which is great. He said, wonderful story about Charlotta and Raymond, but do you have comments or advice on where to start when both parties feel equally wronged?
Right. And that's the importance of a mediator. And that's our friend Lynn, who worked with Charlotta and Raymond. It took months of interaction with each of them. And one of the key questions is, okay, I understand how you see the other party's responsibility in this, but have you ever considered that perhaps you might have some responsibility? And trying to frame the question in that way to help a person examine themselves. It's kind of like what I said about nonviolent communication. If I need to first stop and look at myself and say, so what am I feeling here? What is behind that feeling? What needs do I have that aren't being met in this moment? And one part of that is, many times when we're reacting in anger and frustration and maybe even intense hatred for another person because of what we believe they've said or they've done and how it's harmed us, many times we're angry with ourselves, and we're projecting our intense feelings toward ourselves, feelings of condemnation, feelings of rejection. We're projecting that onto the other person. And it's important that we take some time. We try to slow things down. If we're directly in a conflict, argument, let's say, with the other person, sometimes we need to say, I just need a break. I need to take some time. I need a few minutes here so that we can just kind of stop the runaway bus and ask ourselves, what's happening with me, and what am I feeling? What do I need that I'm not getting in this moment, so that I can actually have compassion on myself first? So it's practicing self-compassion first, so that I'm in a place to honestly ask, what's that other person feeling? What do I see going on there? What are they possibly feeling? What might their needs be? And only in that way am I able to look on the other person with compassion instead of condemnation. So self-compassion comes first, and then compassion for the other. That is how the two can get to a point of saying, okay, maybe I've got some responsibility in this too, instead of only projecting all the blame onto the other individual. So Marshall Rosenberg's work is tremendous in this, and he's worked with everything from Palestinian-Israeli conflict to the kind of conflicts that we've dealt with in schools and universities. And so he's written books about just everything from marriage to raising children to you name it. So I just can't recommend him strongly enough.
Yeah, and it's part of the facilitator's job to decide, are they ready to come together? You know, is each party ready to take responsibility for what they've done? And most times we've seen that. Let's see, I've been in conferences where we had to have a timeout and take someone out to the hall and let them cool down a bit and listen to them a little bit before they were able to come back and be a listener in the circle. Yeah, there was one conference that one little fourth grader really wanted to meet with the people who were bullying her, and the bully girls would never accept responsibility, and we just could not have a circle with them. We could not guarantee that the one little girl would be safe. So it didn't happen.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think we have time for just this one last question from Ilya. He mentions a little over a year ago, we had a Zoom event with a personal story of a woman whose husband was killed through a blood feud in Albania. And so that's something that's traditional in that part of that country and also in part of Montenegro. And it leads to, you know, cycles of violence that go on for generations. And he asks, what would be a good way to change some difficult cultural traditions like this one? And when would one start to challenge something like that? If you have any insight. I mean, that's obviously a big question, but.
Yeah, it's huge. And it's a lot of the motivation I had behind my dissertation work, because I was trying to find any possible restorative practices within traditional Kazakh culture that could be reintroduced, because over 70 years of the Soviet Union and probably another 100 years of Imperial Russian rule had stamped out a lot of traditional practices. But I was able to work with semi-nomadic Kazakhs from China and try to understand more of their traditional ways of resolving conflict within their villages. And what I learned is that the elders need to be empowered in order to build resilience into the communities that are in conflict. They need to be handed back their function as elders who mediate and who provide the moral education for their communities. And when we have mixed ethnic conflicts, just 2 years ago this month, villages in southern Kazakhstan erupted in violence over a traffic accident between a Kazakh man and some Dungan men, also known as the Hui of China. So they're Han Chinese Muslims. And a traffic accident led to 25,000 people fleeing as refugees over the border because they were being attacked by their neighbors. If efforts had been made to bring the elders of both communities together and to focus on relationship and respect and fostering dialogue between the communities and deepening relationships between the elders of the communities, they could have stepped in immediately when this conflict began. It spread by social media. what began as a traffic accident led to a beating, led to an attempt by police to arrest the men who had beaten the other man, and the police then were beaten, and the word went out over social media, let's get our revenge. And so if the elders had been empowered, had had a relationship between them, and I've heard stories of this from Nigeria, where a pastor and an imam who had been actually fighting, physically fighting, trying to kill the members of the other community, how one reached out to the other, they began to meet together, they began to build a relationship, they began to forgive and heal, and then went to work communities to de-escalate incidents that happened. And so that's the kind of blood feuding that you're talking about. But at some point, people on both sides begin to get tired of it and begin looking for solutions. And if you have people, mediators, who can step in and help, that can make a world of difference when something like that's happening. So
Thank you. Yeah.
in the chat, I have shared the PDF file of the book, Nonviolent Communication. So any of you can download that now or save the chat and download it later. But I'll go ahead and share some other links that Boyan and Rachel can also share with the rest of you, like we've talked about.
Yeah, I'll share the links probably on our Facebook and Instagram as follow-up to this. Or you guys, anyone who's not on Facebook or Instagram can email me or whatever. Just one last quick question, I guess. If you have a minute or two, we've covered some of this. What, in your opinion, should one do if the other does not accept any part of the conflict and refuses to repent or listen? And I guess, Jeanine, you touched on this with that example, but if you want to add anything else.
Yeah. Each one of us, if like Charlotta, in order to go on with life, we've got to really search within our hearts. And maybe it's only with God's help that we can find the grace to choose to forgive, even if the other person takes no responsibility. Otherwise, we've tied ourselves to that other person. That other person becomes like the proverbial albatross tied around the neck that beats us to death if we can't let go. It's been said that, yeah, refusing to forgive someone else who's harmed you, and to live in bitterness is like drinking rat poison and waiting for the rat to die. It just kills us. And if we can't find that grace within ourselves, then all I can suggest is that you cry out to God and ask him for the grace. And it may mean day after day after day, sometimes for years, of mouthing the words, I forgive him, I forgive her, I forgive you, and coming back and doing it again and again and again, and crying out to God for that grace. That's all I can offer, because we can't force another person to take responsibility.
Thank you. That's actually a really great note to end on. Because yeah, sometimes we need that supernatural help. I think it's just too much for us on our own. I think I'm going to stop the recording now.